Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Light Up Your Metabolism podcast. It is currently the holiday season when this episode is airing, and I know that this could be a really stressful time of year for people, not only because of all the busyness, but also because a lot of us who are very health conscious, it's a really difficult time of year, right? To be consistent, to stay really consistent with our goals. And oftentimes that leads to a lot of judgment, self-hatred, and just being unkind to ourselves. And I have been talking on my Instagram stories about this idea of this inner friend. And I recently got in touch with my inner friend. And I have been on a journey since earlier in this year about discovering and getting in touch with my emotions, because I was always someone who was like, yeah, positive emotions are great, and all the other ones, who has time for that? And it really got me honestly into a lot of trouble. Well, into just a place where I didn't want to be in my life. I was really I was really unwilling to feel a lot of emotions. Anger was one that came up for me that I just felt that I if I look back on, I realize I wasn't allowed, quote, to feel anger growing up. And it's not something I relate to now. And I also often hear women say, well, I'm not mad, but it's like, girl, you should be mad. He cheated on you or something like that. So a lot of times it's just, especially women, we talk ourselves out of experiencing emotions. And when we repress emotions, it can really, really self-sabotage us. And when I first heard this, I'm like, oh yeah, well, how is that really happening? Like, is that true? How does the body know? There are books out there, The Body Keeps the Score, and that they're kind of now understanding maybe a little bit more that a lot of this is stored in our fascia. It's stored in the memory of the water that's within our body. We are 99% water by molecule. And so there's a really cool sort of quantum aspect to our emotions. And I really wanted to bring on today's guest, Erin Gunzelman, because whatever she posts on Instagram, it just, I don't know if you have this feeling where when you see someone, you're like, this girl is soul family. And she is just such a light. And I think that I chose December 25th for this podcast episode to come out because I think that this is the time of year when this episode is really needed. I think we could all do with slowing down, becoming a little bit more present, and starting to tune in deeply to our emotions, to whatever we're experiencing, enhance our awareness, and deepen our intuition. And so in this podcast, we really didn't have an agenda other than to just see where the conversation took us. And I thought it was just such a beautiful conversation because everything that comes out of Erin's mouth just feels so well said, so timely. And I just really resonate with her energy and just we wove through it all. We talked about different things about self-compassion, the healing journey, how, what to make of things like love and these complex topics and emotions and where that all fits in with our health journey. So another thing that we made sure to talk about is this concept of alchemy, because Erin talks a lot about alchemy. That's her podcast. It has the word alchemy in it. I've left all her information in the show notes for you all, but emotional alchemy is the idea of transforming pain into joy. And, this is something that as I reflect on my life, on my 2024, that a lot of the most painful moments in my life actually were those that led to my greatest joys. And so this idea of allowing all emotions to be there, I mean, this is deep, philosophical and psychological work. And, unless you're maybe like a Buddhist monk, I don't know if you'll get there, but these little nuggets of wisdom that are shared in this interview, I think you will really enjoy. And I hope that the energy that Erin brings onto the show is something that feels refreshing for you during this time of the year, reminding you to slow down, go inward, and be more gentle to yourself, because we don't have to be perfect around the holidays to have a beautiful life, to be really healthy, to fill in the blank. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode, into the interview with the lovely Erin Gunzelman. Erin, thanks so much for being here today on the Light Up Your Metabolism podcast. So happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So this podcast may or may not relate directly to metabolic health, but I've just, I see a lot of the content that you post, Erin, and it's just very thought-provoking, and I love your energy, and I just think that there's so much about health, life in general, that we just don't know. And this episode, I want to feel like it's like a zooming out. We're going to look at concepts that maybe, there's not a direct tie to, spiking blood sugar, but maybe there is, like there's so much that goes into what regulates our metabolic health. Our mitochondria are these sensors, and they're scanning our environment for threats. And there's just different things and different approaches other than, carbs and berberine that we're going to talk about today. So, Erin, I would love for you to just start sharing your story. Take it wherever you want to go. I was listening to one of your podcast episodes, these beautiful lessons that you've learned. So we'll just take it where it goes.
Thank you so much. So kind. Really exciting. I love zooming out. That's kind of, I guess that's like the story. It's part of the way I've always been. I really enjoy holding paradox. A lot of people don't,
No,
it can be really
hard.
Uncomfortable. Yeah. And we're kind of approaching, I think, this time just collectively as a human family, where it's like, we kind of have to, in order to exist in the world. Like there's light and there's dark, and so it's all related to me. Like you're saying, it's the supplements and the circadian health, and it's our blood sugar. It's all of the things and more, all of that. Right. And I say this a lot too. It's like, I'm not anti-Western medicine. I'm not anti-allopathic medicine. I'm not anti-anything. It's just, we're all individuals. And my story, I guess, specifically, my health journey has been sort of what delivered me to the truth, or my truth, or that zoomed out view. And it's constantly evolving. It's been this almost constant evolution of my own consciousness. And health was the way that I opened the door and now orient my life, I guess, to being more of a vessel. I feel like I'm a bit of an instrument for consciousness, for the divine. I talk a lot more about spirituality, and I think it's really cool. We can come at it from like a quantum perspective or a spiritual perspective. I don't even use the term woo-woo anymore. I'm over that. Perceiving energy is not woo-woo to me. It is so real. It is just as real as this computer and you sitting right in front of me, like everything. And so I, for goodness, almost 2 decades, really struggled with symptoms related to endometriosis. And a lot of other autoimmune related sort of things, and mental health stuff that kind of unfolds from being in chronic pain for so often and so long. My face was covered in acne, and it was really intense for a while. I spent like a good 3 years in my bed, just with chronic pain. It was really intense. I never had surgery. I don't actually technically know if that's what it was endometriosis. But all the symptoms track, and what we know, we don't actually know that much about the condition that we call endometriosis, to be honest. I don't think. But I think it's helped me realize, the physical pain aspect of it helped me go really deep into those crevices of our mind and zoom way out, right? I can acknowledge the fact that I am a human, and there's a physical reality that we all participate within, and there are protons and neutrons, and there are all sorts of things happening here. But then there's also this other dimension. There's the fact that this, like maybe I'm a multi-dimensional infinite soul, like I'm a light being, and I can have a lot of compassion for the human me who has a really hard time sometimes navigating this physical world, but also be an eternal being who's kind of zoomed out from all of that at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. So what, I heard you say in one of your podcast episodes that the sort of questions that you were asking yourself started to change and evolve. And I feel like I love that concept because, one of my business coaches said, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. And it was like, and at first it's just like, what does that even mean? But maybe you can, dive into that.
That just gave me a bit of a chill because it's so true. And yeah, honestly, I think what's coming to mind right now, at least, is shifting the questions from looking externally to asking internally questions, like, and not so much from a place of like self-flogging or anything like that, but like, why is life meeting me in the way that it is at this moment, right? Because I believe that we create our reality. Our vibratory state is what determines each next moment. It's what's pulling the future to us, or it's coming at us based on our internal world, essentially. And getting very curious about what's happening in there was, I think, the shift in terms of the questions. Not so much, I mean, just to put in the context of my own health and healing, it's like, why is this happening to me? Why can't anyone help me? It's interesting, especially with endometriosis, and a lot of women's conditions, I think, the way that we're met in Western medicine, it sort of reinforces a lot of beliefs that put us in the victim seat, right? Like, no one can help me. I have to do it all by myself. I have to carry this. I have to figure it out. I mean, I quit a job. I was an intel analyst. I worked for the government. I quit a job to go back to school for nutrition and just totally changed my life because no one could help me. And that was, I think, the wrong question. Like, I was asking the wrong question, and it was because of a belief I was holding. And so shifting into looking more into my own beliefs and my own perception about the realities and the truths that I'm encountering. Yeah, that was step one. That's what's coming to mind right now. But
Yeah. And so how did the questions evolve? Because I think a lot of us can relate, my journey is similar to yours. I had PCOS, covered with acne, and then, went back to school, quit my speech therapy job to do this. So yeah, for nutrition. So we got very similar path and trajectory.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I was in that space of why is this happening to me? Like I relate so much to that unfortunate victim reality that we find ourselves in kind of just by accident, because these things are hard. These things, I was in yoga teacher training at the time, and everyone in the room around me was like this skinny little stick. And I was like, objectively, I probably eat the healthiest diet here. And I felt so like righteous and validated, like in my victimhood. And it's like, we don't go there on purpose, but that arguably is not a place from that we can heal from until we're out of that place. So can you walk us like through those questions and that mindset?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. The mindset shift. I mean, I literally remember like laying on the bathroom floor. And it still happens. I still have flare-ups, right? Like, I have healed this chronic condition, but healing to me is, even the definition has shifted and evolved so much, right? My capacity to be with myself in these circumstances. My life looks completely different now. And so it's a very different approach. And that is, again, also part of the evolution in the mindset and the questions I'm asking myself. I'm not even sure if there are that many questions anymore. That's like where I've reached this place of surrender. It was the realization, I think, that my emotions were at the root of everything. Not making the connection that my physiology was an expression of my mental world in the way I was speaking to myself. And the beliefs I was holding about the way I navigate physical reality. So laying on the bathroom floor and I'm asking, why can't anyone help me? I'm feeling really scared and these types of things, right? And shifting into a place of surrender. I know Joe Dispenza talks about this. Like he'd get like a big fever and he'd go to some weird place mentally and get a bunch of downloads. Like I kind of feel the same way when I get sick now because it's pretty rare. Like I come down with a flu-ish type fever kind of thing, but I see it as like a purge, like, and we can talk about that from like a metabolic perspective, right? Like literally a cellular clean out on certain levels. But on an energetic level, I think there's also a lot of like thought patterns that get ripped out and belief systems and things like that. And so that's been the evolution. Wanting, needing, thinking someone outside of me had to come save me. And wondering when this white knight would arrive to lift me up and carry me out of the really bad situation sometimes, into trying to understand my own co-creator sort of, like abilities and what that even really means, like taking inspired action from this place of intuition that doesn't make logical sense, especially not to everyone in the medical community, not everybody in your family, not society's standards. It's a pretty radical thing, like leaning into your intuition. Because honestly, the thoughts didn't help. Like it was honestly decentering the ego, I think, decentering the mind. And all of that is really what was helpful for tapping into the guidance and the intuition to then drop in. So maybe that's a better road to go down. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So how do we get from these thoughts and we're stuck in these emotional loops of like, we feel a symptom and then we feel, oh my gosh, I have pain. We're stressed about the pain. And then it triggers another emotion, like, or another thought of like, I'm never going to get better. And then it's just these loops of thoughts and emotions. The thoughts feed the emotions, like, flames. and then how do we move from there to being able to hear clearly our intuition? Because from experience, when I'm in my, very predictable, I don't have enough time, I have so much to do, I'm overwhelmed loop, my intuition is probably not really very present there, or like feeling sorry for myself. So how do we, is there something you teach, or is there some steps or anything that can guide us closer to that intuitive place?
Totally. So it's a little tricky. I call it the pathless path because nobody, but nobody.
I love that so much because there's not there's no beautifully said. It's just the truth of that. It's making me laugh so much. I love it.
But really, that's the crux of it. If we're laughing, like that means that's my favorite thing. Okay, tangent. I was just at the beach. We were talking. I was in Florida. And I was having a really tough moment. I was having a really hard time. I didn't know where to go, what to do. I'm standing in the water and I saw, and I think we've all been there. We just say to God or creator, source, whatever. We say, what do you want from me? Like, what the heck do you want from me? And I'm pretty sure, literally, I'm 35 years old. This was the first time in my life that I actually heard a non-egoic response, like something that wasn't my own mind, like telling me, like you're saying, like, you got to do this, this, and this, and change this about your diet and do this. It literally, like, the voice that I heard was like, nothing. And I laughed so hard. Like, I'm so frustrated. I'm up. I feel like backed into a corner and I'm like, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do now? And literally it was clear as day that the voice was like, nothing. And I laughed so hard. And every time it was such a realization, because I think when we were able to see the cosmic joke of it all, like really, truly laugh about how ridiculous, like I dream of that sometimes, like when I'm laying on the floor in pain, it's like there's a higher version of myself who's probably laughing at like how hard of a time I'm having. Because when I'm not in my physical body, when we are just consciousness doing whatever consciousness does, when it's not in physical bodies, it's probably like, wow, I really wish I ate that pizza, like, or enjoyed the heck out of that movie or whatever the thing was that we beat ourselves up about.
Yeah.
And so, like just to say the cosmic joke of it all, like I think that laughter piece is so key, and that's a big part of it, is like realizing the illusion, like the veil drops and we suddenly see beyond a limiting belief or a pattern that we were holding on to that was actually holding us back. Because what if the answer is nothing? What if nothing is required of us? Like, what if it's just to be? What if we're already like worthy and perfect and healthy in this moment? And how do we get to that spot? And so that's how we get back to then the pathless path, because especially for each individual, it looks incredibly different and unique. And that's the whole point. We are here expressing our own version of consciousness. I cannot stress this enough, but I truly believe like we each hold a puzzle piece to a very, very infinitely large puzzle. And it is so important to express ourselves authentically and truly. And I think that's really at the root of a lot of our symptoms, is the programming we receive when we come in really kind of knocks that out of us, or pushes us off that path that we're on, right, to fit somebody else's agenda. Or it's even just, you know, like if you're not thinking your own thoughts, if you're not questioning your own beliefs, odds are someone else has put some there, and it's probably going to benefit another agenda, whether that's nefarious or well-intentioned or not. It doesn't really matter. They're not yours. And so your soul, your guidance, your higher self, whatever you think about it, is going to try and communicate with you to get you back on that pathless path. And so those sensations that we feel in our body, emotions, are just energy to me. It's just information. The same way light codes from the sun, UVA, UVB, right? Like we are in a big energy hologram. And so feeling sadness is like, in my mind, it's really similar to like getting red light. You know what I mean? Like, not to compare the two, but just because we can't see them, right? Like with our human perception. Yeah. Like our near infrared. Yeah. Like our human perceptions are limited, but we feel these sensations in our body. And like you were saying, it's like we attach stories to them. Maybe when we were little, it wasn't acceptable to get angry. And so that gets pushed down. And so sadness becomes really easy for us to express. Maybe sadness was really safe. And so now as adults, when we're not in that environment where the anger wasn't acceptable, we're now out in the world, and that our body is saying, hey, you can set a boundary now, or you can get angry, or that anger needs to go, right? It's in our field. We all emit an electromagnetic frequency from our heart. We've got a biofield. We know all about it, right? There's a lot of pockets of dense stuff in there that's trying to wiggle its way out so we can bring in more of that light. And that's why the quantum conversation is so, incredibly important to me. And just, it blows my mind, because intuitively, I think we all know, and it makes sense, right? Like, oh, I felt a sensation in my body. I say this like a headache. If we didn't have a name for a headache, if we didn't have a word for it, what would be different about our response, right? Like, oh, there's a pounding in my head. I'm going to sit down, and what if we just tuned in and really focused on that sensation? Would we notice that maybe, geez, the last 3 days I've been looping on those thoughts about my mother-in-law coming to visit, and it's been really stressing me out. And I didn't even realize like how in my head I was, or, you know, that thing that I hadn't been saying to someone that's really on my heart that I really want to share, you know, like it's never accidental. Like to me, it's all related, and we just can't see it technically. And we're conditioned to not pick up on those sensations. And then before we know it, our brain, which is an organ, just like every other organ in our body, it's designed to keep us safe, has attached a story and a meaning to the sensation that we're feeling, the panic in our chest, or, you know, whatever it is that's happening in our body. That really is just a temporary sort of message that says, hey, you're off the path, or, you know, maybe you need a rest. Just sit down on the side of the path for a minute, right? Like it's whatever that is. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love that concept that these feelings, emotions, whatever we are experiencing in our body, you said that we are programmed or conditioned to not feel them and to ignore them. And, you know,
sometimes,
looping back to something with blood sugar, one of the things I notice is that a lot of people don't understand they have early signs of blood sugar issues because we medicate them away. So if we wake up feeling tired, we will
Yes.
just have more coffee, or
Yes.
we're tired throughout the day, so we snack to keep our energy up. We're feeling
Right.
inflamed, so we take ibuprofen. We can't
Yep.
sleep at night, so we take melatonin. So those are just a couple of examples of how
Yes.
we're pushing down these beautiful messengers that are trying to communicate with us. So what
Big
so
truth. Yes.
yeah, so talk more about the sensations, about, like you said, maybe it wasn't safe to feel anger in our childhood. For people who
Yeah.
are hearing that kind of a sentence for the first time, and this like
Mm.
conditioning to not feel emotions. So if you're hearing this, like if you're, going to speak to someone who's hearing this kind of for the first time, like how can we bring that
Mm.
information to them and make it a little more tangible?
Yeah. Well, goodness. Yeah. Where to begin? Again,
Mm-hmm.
it's like so individual
Mm-hmm.
because, I mean, yeah, there's so many different factors that play into how we each connect with our physical body. I see differences
Mm.
between men and women. I see differences in ages. I see differences with all sorts of things.
Yes.
And I mean, it's hard to, we're human. It's like innately traumatic on some level just to exist in the world these days. Like you're saying, like it's in our face constantly. Like keep up with this corporate job. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got to drink the coffee first thing in the morning just to make it to work. And then by the time you're home in front of Netflix on the couch, you're drinking wine to put
Mm-hmm.
yourself down from the blood sugar spike, the uppers
Yeah.
and the downers and the substance abuse, right? And
Yeah.
so tuning into our body, I think it's just a big part of this is slowing down and
Mm-hmm.
really connecting in with what's going on and letting that be okay. I think we're also, that's part of the conditioning, is to feel selfish for sitting down and just being quiet. Men and women, it's a different type of programming, I think, for everyone, but taking time for yourself to connect in. I mean, you can do just a simple body scan morning and night, and you might be really, really like remarkably surprised at what you're able to pick up on in terms of this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
watching the thoughts, right? And you mentioned that earlier, and something that popped in my head was like, once those loops kick off, right? And it's like, well, I got to do this and this and this, and then this thing happens, and we're down the spiral. What if we back up and just witness those thoughts a little bit? Like, how much
Mm-hmm.
consciousness can we bring into wiping down the countertops at the end of the day before we go to bed, or like putting the kids' toys away, or whatever it is? Like, can we bring more consciousness? Like, can we just be fully aware that we're in a body and turn our brain off for just like a minute, or at least just witness the thoughts and not judge them, right? Like, oh, that's an interesting thought that I just had about the thing that my husband didn't do and that I've asked him to do 70 times or whatever it is, right? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like really tuning into the physical sensations in our body. I'm trying to think of a good example. Things that are like symptoms, you mean? Is that what you mean?
I mean, no,
Oh,
even
okay.
just just the, like I said, the conditioning to not
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Push
I,
it
I
down.
do see that be, there's differences across genders and across age ranges, like generations. I see it
Yeah.
so differently.
Yeah.
Um, you know, even just,
Cultural.
yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
differences there. But you said something that just, this is coming up a lot in my personal life with friends of mine who are going through issues, that there's so much. You said let it be okay. And I think
Mm.
that's like probably the most, if you take anything away from this podcast, I think that is perhaps the most important thing that we can maybe ask ourselves, like, and what if this was okay?
Yeah.
Like, can this be okay? Because I think, I'm going to speak just for myself on this one. I think that what makes everything worse is judging the fact that something's happening. It's like, oh, I have a headache. And then we judge that. It's like, well, I didn't eat enough and my blood sugar is doing
Yes.
this. And then I'm in a victim state and then I'm figuring it out why, instead of
Yes.
like saying, okay, I have a headache. And can it be okay? Like my physical body is experiencing discomfort, and can we be with it? Can we not make it wrong? And then the same goes for so many emotional states. Like I have a really good friend, and we're both working through tons and tons of deep childhood trauma that neither of us really recognized that we had. And it's just like, she's like, oh my God, I'm getting anxious. And, there's all this talk about nervous system regulation. Nervous system regulation does not mean don't feel anxious. Exactly. So we were saying, like, that's like saying, oh, I never want my blood sugar to spike ever again. Like, good luck. You're a human. It's designed to do that. Yes. So you're going to have, just like waves in an ocean, you're just like, to not have an emotion or a reaction sometimes is like asking the ocean to be flat 100% of the time. Like, good luck ever having that. So it's like, can this be okay? Can we remove the judgment from it? It's like so powerful. I'm an Enneagram 1. I'm like, my middle name is like inner critic. Oh. So it's just like, and I don't even hear it.
Deafening. It's so, well, because we are so, I mean, it is a part of us. I could not, you nailed it. I totally agree. I hear you 100%. And this is partially why it's the zooming out is so important to me. Like you're saying, like holding the paradox. Gabor Mate, he talks about, healing isn't not experiencing pain anymore. And that's why it's so important to me to say to people, like, I still have flare-ups. I have bad days. Like, I know I come across like real love and light. And it's true. Like, I'm really silly and I'm happy and I laugh a lot. I also really struggle. Like, I know the other side of that. And as Gabor Mate says, like, it's not that you never experience pain anymore. It's that you expand your capacity to hold the pain. Again, that paradox of being a human, and that judgment piece is so important too. I talk about this example all the time, but we attach the meaning thinking we know, thinking we have the 10,000 foot view of reality when we have no idea. It's that old Chinese proverb story. It might not be Chinese. I don't know about.
Are you going to say about the horse and
the
sun? Yes, I was just going to share it. Oh my gosh, because it just popped into my head. Yes. So it's like this, I think it's a man, I think I nailed the story. A man has a son and a horse, and the horse runs away, and the neighbors come over and they say, oh, your horse ran away?
So sorry.
So sorry. What bad luck? And he's like, good, bad, who can say?
He's like, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. We'll see. And then the next day, the horse comes back with another horse, and they're like, oh, your horse returned. You have another horse. What good luck? Good, bad, who can say?
He's like,
then
maybe.
The son was riding the horse and fell off and broke his leg. Oh, that's such bad luck. Oh, that's terrible that happened. Good, bad, who can say, right? Yeah. Then the army comes by the next day. They're recruiting, and he doesn't get recruited because of the broken leg. Good, bad, who can say? I love this story so much because it's exactly what you said. We are assigning meaning to everything. Headache, bad. Like anxious, bad. Why is it? Like, can, I mean, even just judging something as like a positive versus negative emotion, like, can it? I like calling them more like love-based and fear-based. I didn't invent that, but
whatever. There's only two. It's rooted in one or the other, absolutely. And I'd even say there's love in all of it. If we're being really honest and zooming really out, there's love even in the fear and the dark and all of that, because it's really just a cry for love. Right? There's love even in the shame and the guilt and all of that. It's all just information. And the more neutral we can stay, I think the faster it shifts, honestly. Yeah. And we can expand and learn. We're only here, I think, to learn how to give and receive love unconditionally. That's internally with ourselves and also externally, because the universe, as Robert Edward Grant always says, is you inverted. Universe. It's you pushed out. So that's what we're interacting with. What we perceive in our reality is part of what's going on inside of us. If we're judging ourselves, I think we are what we judge, generally speaking, but that can be really destabilizing and hard to hear sometimes because we don't realize we're judging. The programming is so deep. I mean, there's just Yeah. And
I
again,
used
it's
to
like,
say it feels like fact. So I come from a very judgmental
yes.
family, and my family, I
Yeah.
don't know what it is. Even I think just the collective area where I grew up, Long Island, New
Yeah.
York. Sorry, we're judgmental. So it's like, look at what the neighbors are doing. I can't believe they saw their Christmas decorations up, right? So very judgmental. And so for me, like when I was with my ex-wife, I would say something and she's like, "Did you have to say that?" And I was
Oh,
like, "Why?" And she's like, "That's really judgmental." I was like, "Well, it's just a fact." And she's like,
yeah.
it's a negative, like it's a judgmental fact." And so I started to notice that what I just looked at was like,
Right.
"Oh, that person's doing this or whatever."
Yeah.
Like I didn't realize I was judging as much as I
Totally.
was. And
Totally.
I've really worked hard to let that go. And, I think it's, lessons that I'm going to have to learn for
It's
my
the
whole
spiral.
life.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
re-meet the same shit over and over again. Like, oh my gosh. And it's like a new level of awareness.
Yes.
You're like, oh wow. Yeah. I looked at that. I thought I worked myself up and down that thing, but look, it goes even deeper. And that's
Yeah.
why like
Yeah.
the people who are throwing judgment at each other out in the world or at me or wherever, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's in my mind, I call everything a trauma response almost jokingly these days,
Yeah.
but it really is. I mean, it's rooted in trauma. There was something about what they're calling out in the world that was unacceptable or not okay. Or I talk about the mother wound a lot. I think it's
Ooh.
something that like we should really collectively get to know, I think, because it's how the patriarchy gets handed down generation after generation, especially by women unconsciously, like you're saying. And to me, it has a lot to do with existential terror. Literally, like, I don't deserve to exist. It's, I think, part of like why we see people walking around pissed off at women breastfeeding their babies in public, right? And you're like, wait a minute, that's like the most natural thing that exists on the planet. But you're triggered and you're freaked out by this woman doing this very, like, literally, like, life giving act in public. And it's truly like on a subconscious level, probably because somebody maybe left them in their crib crying while they were hungry and a baby. And so subconsciously, we see that out in the world, become triggered, and then project all of that pain out onto what we're witnessing, right? In the world. And it's just like when you realize how deep it goes subconsciously, the program, the emotion, all of the meaning that we attach to all this stuff, you can't like, who could you judge, right? Like we're all just children of the light and love, and we're just doing the best we can with what
Yeah.
we've got and the awareness that we have in those moments. And so it's so important to choose love, like truth, like truly what is the most loving way that we can respond to ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, like I have a headache. Yes, we're conditioned to grab and to numb and to suppress, but what if we got really curious about like why that pattern exists? Why is that my response? Did I choose that consciously, or did someone show that to me? Did I learn that? Right? We have this whole conversation about genetics. Like, is disease genetic? I'd argue no. Yes, there's a very fun conversation about epigenetics and things like that, but you know what's learned is like eating habits and like emotional repression habits and judgments and things like that, right? And really, I think we can turn our genes on and off. So, it's really fascinating when you really start to think about like how deep all of it is and how connected it all is. We
Yeah.
don't have the bird's eye view. There's another dimension that's like interacting with us the way that we interact with shadows and see shadows, that
Mm-hmm.
maybe they can see what's happening next. I like to think of my life as like a board game, and
Mm-hmm.
like I'm a piece getting moved around, like, and then I made this chance, and then I rolled a 5, so I moved over here, or that kind of thing, right? And it's like,
I rolled a five.
and that person's moving over there, so the game is constantly changing, but I can't see the whole board because I'm on the board. But I'm
Mm.
trying to get where I'm going. There are no wrong turns. All roads lead to wherever it is I'm going, this pathless path. But I don't get to know how or when I arrive there. We don't know how many days we get on Earth. We don't know when our last time we're going to close our eyes is. Like, and that's why we're here to learn, you
I
know?
love that.
Oh,
I
me
think
too.
this helps take a lot, I don't know, just in general, a spiritual practice and talking about this stuff just really helps me feel a little bit less anxious because we're
Oh,
so in our bodies. And what Tara Brach talks about, that like the illusion of separation. I'm sure other teachers talk about it too, but like we feel so disconnected from, it's like you are this other, you know, we other people because it's just, and then we judge ourselves for judging, but also it's so in our, I don't want to say in our DNA, but it's, you know, early humans had to see other tribes and, you know, it was like, oh, they are a threat. So we still have that in us.
It literally is in ourselves. I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, that's another whole piece. Like, we don't even talk about the ancestral trauma. Like, family members 7 generations back might have experienced a famine, and that might be influencing some of our patterns and thoughts and feelings around food, or how we approach health, or all sorts of things, lack programs, everything. It's all connected.
So
exactly.
Wild.
Yeah.
One thing you said before, you mentioned that, you know, we talked about love and fear-based emotions, and you said, but there's love in all of it.
Yeah.
In this book, Conversations with God, they said that like love is like all emotions, like the color white, how the color white is all colors.
Yes.
And if you think about love, like all emotions, and it was one thing I felt, I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel like I know what love is. I feel like I was loved by certain people in my life conditionally. It's like, if you do this thing, then you will get this attention, you will get love, you'll get praise. Maybe it's more praise and not even. And so I started to just question, do I even know what love is? Like, I'm like, I don't even know what it is. So if someone's
I don't think we do. Yeah.
I don't think we do.
Yeah. I didn't. I totally agree. Yeah. I had no idea. I was conditioned into sort of a false narrative of like what love could be. It's like fairy tales and a soft carpet and cushy roses and all the things, right? But I've learned through my own healing journey that love is actually like a sturdy backbone sometimes, and like a clear no. Like that can be incredibly loving also. And what it looks like to be in truth, because love and truth are the same to me. That's a beautiful image. I've never read Conversations with God. I want to go pick it up now, because it's like really a pretty good. It's like like a pretty classic one. I've never read.
It's I'm listening to it on Audible, and they have a man and a woman alternate talking. And it's really great. But there's so many nuggets in there. I'm sure I could listen again and again, but it's just I like beautiful imagery.
Totally. And I was just thinking and chatting with a friend about this recently. It's like, because of that, like, awareness, and it goes back to your question about like asking better questions and things like that. It's like, it's on so many different layers. You know, we're taught that there are 3 primary colors. And then, you know, kind of like the white thing made me think of this. It's like you start mixing them together and you realize like, oh shit, there's a spectrum. Like there's a spectrum of colors. It's not just these 3 solid colors. And then we like go up a level. And then, I mean, you could talk about like the 5 platonic solids and all these like dodecahedrons and all this geometry. And it's like everything in nature is made up of these solid things, and they collapse in on each other. And then we start adding colors, and it just becomes, but this is levels of awareness in ways that we can interpret reality. And it's like, you see an instrument, right? And maybe you've never seen it before because it's from a completely different culture. And so you just look at it and you're like, that's a stringed instrument, right? But then if you do a little research, you might find that it's like some Turkish oud or whatever, right? From some other country that you never knew. And again, now we've all expanded our awareness, and maybe that will influence the way that we approach something else in life. That was on musical breathworks training. There's a Brooke, she has a training called Music. It's really good. I recommend it to everyone. It's about fascia and sound and our bodies. Yeah.
She's amazing. I know. I'm so like, good. I need to do a course of hers, because she just has
love them.
So much information, and that I don't even like. It's like I need to do a whole course on this. But thank you for that recommendation. Okay, so let's.
Tangent.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The whole thing's a tangent. The pathless path, right?
Yes.
So let's maybe start circling in maybe how you found more of this quantum health and stuff, and how it relates to anything that you do, or how it's changed how you perceive the world.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think the quantum conversation, it came into play out of necessity, I think, a little bit because I was feeling so sick and no one had answers. And I mean, we were talking about trauma responses earlier. I have a tendency to intellectualize instead of feeling my emotions. That's like a
There was a
pretty,
meme
yeah.
about that the other day. That was so good. It's like we overthink
Yeah.
because we're not in our bodies. And I was
Yes.
just like, yeah,
We
that's
go
me.
straight up into our heads because it
Yep,
was safer there for us for a long time. I think, when I was,
for sure.
a kid, especially, it was a lot easier for me to research and learn about why someone was mistreating me or doing what they were doing. So that I could understand, like, why would someone treat me this way? And that's what I would choose to do as opposed to set a boundary and say, like, stop doing that. Right. And so that became a pattern of mine. Like, humans are also just like
Relatable.
super fascinating. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, the things I used to Google, oh my gosh, like, geez,
Aw.
it was, yeah. But yeah, like, I think just intellectualizing, being up in our mind, the quantum stuff comes into play, I think, because I realized there was stuff happening that I couldn't see. And because I am so analytical, like, I was an engineer, I love quantifying data. The spiritual side of things really intimidated me for a while because I was like, intuition. I'm sorry, what is that? Like, I don't know.
You have a formula for that?
Yeah, like, where's the proof? Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, it's interesting too, right? Like, my womb space, and this is something I say constantly. It's like there's like a portal to another dimension in between my legs. Like, that's pretty insane. It's so cool. Like, I never thought about it like that, but there is a connection there. Like, women, I think we are nature. Like, it's in our cells. It's literally in our body, like source energy, right? And it's so magical. And that's, yeah, I mean, I used to work with satellites and all the things. And even then I was like, you can't really, like, God must exist because none of this makes sense. I don't really understand. Even the science doesn't fully add up. So we're like going off of something here, subatomic. And so it was really fascinating to me. And I love to still dive deep and research and do all that. But I pair it now. It's bridged, but it's that intersection between science and spirituality. And I really think quantum physics especially, and it's so edgy and cool now, and it's so exciting, but it's quantifying a lot of ancient wisdom, like stuff that humans have known for a very long time and other cultures have been doing and practicing for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it will be interesting to see like how it all kind of merges and comes back together once, yeah, this like conversation becomes way more mainstream, but it's exciting. Yeah.
What are some things that you have learned that you would sort of categorize in this sort of quantum space that have been maybe things that you have put into practice to help support any area of just you?
Yeah. Well, I'm nomadic. I like live completely led by intuition. Like, every single step of my day is like a little prayer to God. That's how I like to envision it. Like, I literally am constantly checking in with my body. Like, do I like this color? Do I want to eat that thing? Does that feel in alignment? Like, is it a good day to work out? Like, what's really going on in my body? And so, that's part of living nomadically. Like, sometimes I stay in a place for 3 months. Sometimes I stay for 2 days. Like, sometimes I'm there for a year. It's all intuitively led and I don't question it. And in that is like all my circadian practices. That stuff feels really good. I travel with a red light. Like, I literally have like,
Mine's charging right there.
yeah, it's like, and because I feel best when I am connected to nature. Like, feet on the ground every morning at sunrise is a non-negotiable for me most of the time. And like the clean water and like making sure I have all of the access to the foods that I need. And this is something I get asked about a lot. And they're like, how do you do that? Like, how do you live that way? It's because I believe I can. And I think it literally, like, I see it so zoomed out. Like, I feel like I knew on a soul level that I was going to be in Costa Rica where I am right now. And some person had an idea to make an organic bakery, which is like my favorite place to eat in where I am at the moment. And like, they had the desire to build this bakery, and that's part of why on a quantum level I was attracted here. It's all energy to me. We're all just balls of energy light, just like walking around, bumping around, banging into each other and like exchanging energy and all that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I think, I don't think that fully was probably the answer that you were looking for,
okay.
But like really tuning in and listening to my body in that way. And it just so happens that all the things intuitively seem to line up with like what happens. I carry my blue blockers with me. Blood sugar balance is really important to me. But yeah, I don't travel with pain meds anymore. I don't have flare-ups like that. And if I do, it's really like you're saying, like the no judgment space, like slowing down and listening to my body and understanding that that's the barometer. Like this is the vehicle that I get to use to navigate physical reality. And so I need to take care of it, and I need to be gentle with it and trust that there's something else is very zoomed out guiding me toward the most fulfillment or toward the most like soul level experience that I could have. There's definitely a big level of like rooting into the uncertainty and being very okay with trusting in the unknown. It can be unnerving.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my lovely friend Molly Eastman. The other day we were having a talk and I was saying something. I was like, I'm just struggling with blah, blah, blah. And she goes, okay, so a coach of mine would say to me right now, like, oh, so you're struggling with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And just like, I'm going through this whole thing. I'm like, well, this, and then she said this, and then this thing happened. And then like going there. And then it's just like, oh, so you're struggling with uncertainty. It's like, I am.
So
and it's
hard.
like, okay, I'll talk to the manager about that. It's just like, oh, uncertainty, that is, these words and concepts and emotions and states that we're in, like sometimes it's just, oh, like, I am, uncertainty is hard. And because what happens is it flares up my controlling, my need to control.
And then before you know it, you've got a physical symptom somewhere in your body. And it's like, oh, shoot. Oh, yeah. I know.
Yeah. And one of the words, I don't know, this was with Molly too. I don't know. I think she got this from some other teacher or whatever it was, but starting to talk about like, oh, that's my preference. Oh, and then she said, like, Michael Singer said that preferences are what basically cause all suffering.
Right.
Because they're blocking you from accepting what is because you're stuck on your preference. So the last time I was in Costa Rica, I was in Nosara.
Oh, nice. That's where I am. Yeah.
Yeah. I was in Nosara for like almost all of March. And I got a fever and I had the flu. I was so sick. So I rarely get sick. Of course, it's when I'm, calming down on vacation and my body's like, oh, we really needed to move through this. So then I had the opportunity and I was like, my preference was to not be sick and have the flu. And it's just like, I was listening to so much Michael Singer and it was like, can you be with this? Can you be with this? And, tensing against what is happening is like the root of suffering. So it's like, oh, we finally landed on, all these
I get it
teachings that all the teachers are trying to explain. But
and using that as information, right? Like that's information like, okay, I'm out of my day-to-day normal environment and that's when I get sick. So maybe I need to now reevaluate some things that are happening, right? Like why could this only occur here while I'm on vacation when I wanted something else? Like obviously the universe doesn't want us to come here and like suffer and like not enjoy Costa Rica. But like I've told you, like it's been raining for 2 weeks here. It makes no sense what's going on. Definitely not my preference, but it's allowed me to kind of investigate and get curious about like what comes up emotionally when things aren't going my way. Why do I think that it isn't going my way? We don't actually know. We don't get to know all the answers. But it always works out better than I could have planned when we release, right? And it's like that, towing that line, because we do want to hold the vision and have dreams, and we are meant to experience things here in the physical that we want to experience. Like our desires are holy, but how we reach them, how we get there. I mean, I've used this analogy a million times. It's like we're in this dark room and it's very dark. You're looking for a doorknob. You're like, I need the doorknob. I need to get out. I need to get out. And you're looking for the doorknob so hard that you miss 4 windows and like 3 trap doors and like so many other ways to get out of the freaking room that would have been really fun. Maybe there's like a water slide out of the room. I don't know. Like, Yeah, we think we know, but our brains are not helpful in that way. Yeah, but the quantum it's an infinite field, and we can connect to that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So you use the word alchemy a lot
I do.
in your stuff. Can
Yeah.
you like what does that mean in like I know
Yeah.
what it means, but like do I know what it means, you know?
Yeah.
So like why what does it mean? Why that
Yeah.
word? Why do you love that word?
I love that word. I love the word. I love the concept. I love the practice. I love everything about it. There's a reason why it's occulted and why it feels like sort of intangible. I think, like you're
Yeah.
saying, like it really, because it's so potent, like these
Mm.
alchemical process. Yeah. So I mean, literally, it's the very literally the process of turning lead into gold, which is
Mhm.
entirely possible, and that's why it was hidden practices and occulted, and it gets a little bit slippery there. But in the way I like to talk about it is from the standpoint of emotional alchemy. And
Mhm.
it's so funny. I was actually going to bring it back to this earlier. Like, how do we deal with these emotions, right? We start getting curious and we realize, like, oh gosh, like I'm actually holding a lot of guilt or shame about this thing, or this thing is producing a lot of anger. And I had no idea like that I was even angry. What do you do then? Well, you alchemize it, right? Like that's when we realize, like, sitting in the fire of what is coming up emotionally for us is what we die. Basically, it's this process of death and rebirth, and it's kind of the willingness to sink ourselves into the flame, turn into ashes, and then rise again as the phoenix. I say this about Costa Rica every time I come here. I don't know why I do it. I've been coming here since 2018, and every time I get here, I think there's something about the fact that it's like 12 hours daylight, 12 hours of night. It's
Yeah.
like perfectly balanced. And
Mhm.
anything not balanced just bubbles to the surface. Like, I don't think it's an accident that like
Mm.
you got sick, right? Like
Not at
every time I
all.
get here, like something crazy happens. I'm like, oh, well, we're just going to shake it all out of our system. Thank goodness. Like, because I leave a different person every time. There's like something that happens in this equator, and it is like the blue zone. Like there's a lot of healing energy here, and there's so many places like this on the earth, obviously, but for
Yeah.
me specific in my design, like Costa Rica is definitely one of those places where like the land and the people, it just triggers you so perfectly so you can meet those emotions and sit in the fire. And I leave every time like a totally new person. There's like a death and rebirth, and you don't have to go to Costa Rica or whatever for that, but it's a really good opportunity, and it's always a great story in my opinion at the end of the day. But that's really what I mean, and that's why I talk about it so much. And
Mhm.
yeah, like this concept of turning what we think, like the broken leg and the
Mhm.
horse running away is
Yeah.
shit, into something like maybe our greatest joys. All of my pain has
Mhm.
translated into my greatest joys. I mean, I would have laughed in your face if you would have told me 5 years ago that I'd be making videos on the internet and talking to people about their feelings. I would have laughed in your face, because it was just, I lived such a different life. And yeah, but
Wow.
I would not give it. I mean, it feels like soul work. Yeah, connecting with people and help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just really,
I love
it's
that.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Yeah,
So many nuggets that we hit on in this pathless path.
yeah,
Slowing down, feeling
yeah,
emotions,
yeah,
try to, you know, be with the emotion,
yeah.
observing instead of
Staying
judging.
curious. Yeah,
Yeah. I
curious, not
love
furious. Yeah,
I love that. I always say a mindset of curiosity is really helpful to disarm perfectionism
oh,
and judgment, which comes up a lot in a lot of my coaching calls. You know, so many of us are like, well, I did this thing. And so, well, my blood sugar spiked and I ate the popcorn. So I might as well just stop doing everything. It's like,
yes,
can we get curious? Like, why did you eat the popcorn? Like, what were you going through? It's like,
right.
and can we hold that with compassion? Can we
Yes,
have compassion for ourselves as a one? This is a lesson I
yes.
have to learn all the time, that I'm really good at compassion for other people. So understanding.
But flip that
Zero
around. Yes,
for over here. It's like, well, and then people are like, God, you're so hard on yourself. I'm like, I just demand excellence in every single
right.
thing that I do at all times. So, and like, for me, that's the lens through which I see things.
Yes,
And it's like, it's helpful to share these things with other people so they can
yes,
point out, it's like, oh, you're being really hard on yourself. I'm like, really? Because
Yeah.
I can see it in other people all the time. Like, you are holding yourself to a really high, unachievable standard right now. And they're like, am I? I'm like, yeah, it's so obvious to me.
Right.
You know, so
Exactly. Yes. And the way
yeah.
we perceive other people in general too, like when you look at someone else and you really can see them, and it's like I look at you like this beautiful, like intelligent, so smart, like loving, exuding, right, light, your bright light. And it's like, do we see that when we look in the mirror? Like, we don't always see that, right? But I think if we stand there and look hard enough, eventually it can shift,
Yeah, that's
because
beautiful.
yeah, really the truth of it is, yeah.
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 Well, thank you. It's
Thank
funny
you.
because you say that and it feels really hard for me to receive that. Yet I can so easily just turn that around and be like, no, 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 that's you.
We're all mirrors for each other.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like, once you realize
Yeah.
like, oh, this is all like a mirror. Like, if I look at someone else and I see something that I want or something like that, it's like, it's because it's triggering in me the same truth. Like, that exists within me and it's trying to get activated. Like, oh, what a gift. What a gift the jealousy or envy is. What a gift all of these feelings that I've got. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much. So
Thank you.
if people want to work with you, follow you, get in touch with you, we will have everything linked in the show notes. But tell us a little about how you work with people and what you're offering.
Sure. Yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned like receiving and that sort of thing, because I'm hosting a retreat in Costa Rica in February of 2025, and it's a women's embodiment retreat. Yeah. And we're going to be talking a lot about receiving the love and all of the things that we absolutely deserve, and what living from an embodied love perspective, like what that really means, what that looks like, and how to do that. Very excited about that. Yeah. And so I'm hosting retreats in person, hopefully often next year. I have another one in January, an alchemy retreat. We're going to be alchemizing all the things. It's like a mentorship. And all of that's on my website. And then, I work one-on-one with folks. I do, like mentorships, 90-minute sessions. A lot of my work tends to be, like longer term containers. I've got a membership on Patreon, and it's filled with a lot of nuggets, all types of wisdom things. It's really, the content is driven by the members. So we've been talking a lot about like money energetics lately, because it's all connected. It's all related, right? Like this pathless path. But if it's up for one of us, it's usually up for all of us, is what I find collectively. Yeah. And so we talk a lot about like inner child work and quantum healing on that level. All kinds of things. Yeah. So membership, Patreon, I host monthly breath work, one-on-one sessions and mentorships and in-person retreats, all kinds of things. Yeah.
Doing
exciting stuff. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on.